Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you the basics, or maybe not the basics. I'm going to show you everything you need to know about remote events and remote functions, and why they're different, and how they're different. So, I just said I'm going to show you everything. When I say everything, I'm going to show you all the things you can do with it. So let's begin. So, I already inserted a remote event into my game. I just clicked on the add button right next to replicated storage, and I added a remote event. So you'll want to do that to start, and I inserted a script into server script service. So I have made a variable called local remote event equals game replicated storage wait for child remote event. I recommend you do the same thing. Just so you can have a variable for your remote event. So we can use this variable later on. So what we're going to do is we're going to say remote event dot on server event connect function, and then type player inside the parentheses, and make sure you have an end with an ending parenthesis like a line or two afterwards. So it should look like this. This is basic code for a remote event. This is what all remote events use at some capacity. And the real thing we want to talk about here is on server event. This is an event of the remote event. So if you don't know what an event is is something that does something else. So in Roblox world, in Roblox development, a lot of things have events. Like if you walk over a part, if you walk over a spawn, and you touch the spawn, there's a touched event for that. Like, what happens if you touch it? What happens if you click a button? There's a clicked event when you click a button. So an event is when you perform a certain action. And in this action, we're just saying when the server receives an event from the client, and we haven't done that yet. We have not done that yet. We have to fire a signal from the client saying, hey, we want to talk to the server. Because this is only going to talk, this is on a server script, and it'll only work from the server. So on server event, it's just a parameter of, it's just an event of remote event. And player is an argument you have to pass this in every single time, or else it will not work. This is telling the game that the player who triggered this event, the player who triggered this remote event call is this player right here, and that's default. Roblox will pass that in by default. We can print player.name if you wanted to, and that will print the player's name who triggered the event. Oh boy, I want to make this not too long of a video. I hope I'm not talking too much. I probably am, but I don't think I'm giving the best definition. But again, on server event will fire after we fire the client, from the client, after we fire from the client. So there's two steps. You have to fire the remote event from the client to receive that call from the server. So this code will do absolutely nothing because we have not fired a event from the client side. So let's go to the client side. I'm gonna go to starter GUI, insert a local script. I'm gonna go back to my server script. I'm gonna copy this remote event variable and paste it into my local script just to save time. I'm gonna say remote event dot. I'm gonna wait like 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds. And I'm gonna say remote event fire server. and it does exactly what it says. It's going to fire the server. Fire means it's going to trigger it. It's going to trigger the server. It's going to trigger this event. It's going to fire this event. It's going to trigger it. It's going to fire it, whatever you like to use. So this will actually run. This code will execute. The code inside here will execute. And this should work. So if I play the game and I go to my output window, it should print my name after a couple seconds. There we go. It prints my username. Whoops, hold on. Oh, hold on. Alright. Got that settled. Anyway, so Fire server triggers the remote event from the client, and on the server, the trigger takes place. And this will work for this whole server. So if you find remote events are used to do something on the whole server, not just the client. Because if you do something on just the client, it's only going to happen on the player's computer. And there's many instances where you're going to want it to happen on everybody's computer. So that's where we use remote events. I hope that was a better definition. And that is the grand definition of what a remote event is. And remote functions, for that matter. It's so we can display data on everybody's computer. So that's that. There's one more method of remote events that you should know. It's called fire all clients. It's basically it's doing the opposite. We're firing from the server to the client. So I'm gonna inside of here, or we could even we could do it inside of here, but I'm not going to. I'm gonna wait a couple seconds. I'm gonna wait 3 seconds. And I'm going to say remote event, fire all clients. And what this will do, this is a built-in method of the remote event. This will fire a event similar to what this is, except if we go to the client side and drop a couple lines there. I'm going to say remote event, the on client event. Connect function. This time we don't need a player argument because we're already in the client side, and the game already knows that we're on the client, and it already knows the local player that we're using. It already knows the player that we're using. So adding the player parameter here is actually not necessary. So yeah, so if we do workspace.baseplate.brickcolor equals brickcolor.red, and I play the game, after how many seconds? 3 seconds, it should turn red. Just like that. But and here's the catch. On the server, it did not turn red. For some reason, actually. Hold on. Okay, I figured out why. It's very simple. I don't know why I didn't know this, but simply put, it's because we're changing the brick color on the client. And this is a great example, actually. You see how it doesn't update on the server? But it updates on my computers, on my player's screen. Because that's exactly what remote events do. I'm changing the brick color to red on my local script, which works on the client, the player's computer. So exactly what it does. If I were to do that on the server, it would update for everybody. And fire all clients will update it for every client in the game. That's what this method does. remote event fire all clients updates it for every player in the game. So every player in the game would have a red base plate like this. A red if you're doing this, but a red base plate just like this. There's also one more method. It's similar to fire all clients, but it's called fire client. It's called fire client. You may have a guess of what it does. It doesn't fire all clients, it just fires one client that you give it. So in particular, it fires one player. And so it fires the player that you give. So it takes a player per argument. And this is not going to work because the player is unknown here. So I'm going to put it in here where this is known. So it knows that I want to pass in the player. I'm going to delete this. Fire client. It knows that I want to pass in the player who triggered the server event, and I want to pass in the player to fire the client. So I'm basically firing the client of the player who triggered this event. And that would work too. That would work the same way as fire all clients, so you don't need to change anything on the client side. So I could remove this, and that would work just the same. The only difference is it wouldn't update for everyone's screen. It would work only if the given conditions are met, which is the player has, in my case, the player has to join the game because the script has to be loaded into the starter GUI. And this code runs after it's fired from the server. And it's only going to fire the client. So it technically would work on every player, but it's not the best example, but that's what it does. It fires for every client, for each client you give it to. It's more specific, that's what it is. That's remote events. Probably not a great explainer. Just like the video if you think that. It's fine, I don't really care about that. So, anyway, remote event functions now. Remote functions act pretty much the same way, except it's a two-way communication, meaning you can actually send a trigger or a fire the server and get information back from the server, which is interesting. And that could be used for a lot of applications. I would like to show you what I mean by that. So if I insert a script into local script, or if I'm going to make a button actually. A text button will do. And I insert a local script into it. And I say script .parent.mouse button one quick connect function. And I say game.replicated storage. Wait for child remote function fire invoke. It's actually called invoke this time. It's the opposite of fire. Remote events are called fire server. Remote functions are called invoke server. So we're invoking the server. We're invoking it, provoking it. Same thing, really. And when we go to the server script, I would do this game.replicated storage. I'm not gonna make a variable this time, just because I don't feel like it. And I say on server invoke equals function. So the syntax is different, but all in all, it does really the same thing. And you add player. Whenever you use remote events and remote functions on the server, You always put player in as your first parameter, as your first argument. You always do. It's by default, Roblox will pass that in for you. It's the player that triggers the event or the function. And what do I mean when we can return multiple data back to the client? If I say, let's say local score equals 0, and I say score plus equals 1, that's just going to increment the score to 1 when they click the button. And I say return score. You might not know what this does, but it's going to do is it's going to send this score value, whatever it may be, to this client because I'm returning it. I'm returning it back. Imagine you had a envelope or a piece of mail, and there's a return address on it, and you want to put that back in your mailbox, and it's going to return back to where it came from. In my case, I'm returning it back to where this remote event originated from, which is the client, and we're passing the score to the client. That was probably a terrible analogy, but hey, I don't know. We're returning the score to the client. We're telling the client that this is what we want to pass. So how do we get that from the client? We say local client on local score equals this. Or we can just say result as for better sense, for better explicitity or clarity. So local result equals this, and we say if there is a result, if we're returning something, then print it. I want to go to my output, and it should print 1. Yes, it did. If I click on it multiple times, it'll continue to print 1, and it multiplies here. So I'm returning the score from the server to the client, just like that. And the only reason the score is not updating more than 1 is because I have this variable inside the function, or inside this remote event. If I move the score outside of here, it's going to update more than 1. Because I was resetting it to 0 every time I clicked on the button. So if I click on it now, and I show you the output window, I click on it now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 times I clicked it. So you can make a clicker game like that. That's how clicker games are actually made, to be honest. Just using a remote function or a remote event. You can make an infinite clicker. That's a game idea, but it's probably taken, but you can always make it anyway. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else I need to touch on, really. If this I don't know how good I made this video really is, but if it was good for you, helpful for you, then tell me that in the comments. If it wasn't, then tell me that too, because I really want to know. I like honest feedback. There's nothing wrong with. I'm not a person that takes all positive feedback. I like to hear the negatives too. So if I did anything that I could have done better, tell me. I'm sure there was. So, anyway. Oh, there's one more thing, actually. You could invoke the client from the server. Like if I remove the score, I do game that replicated storage, wait for child remote function, invoke client, and but why would you want to do that though? Because you can just use remote events for that. remote events take up less memory on your computer. Less it takes less latency, less delay because it's not there's less the software Roblox Studio has to do. It's only a one-way communication, remote events, that is. And remote functions take up more space. So invoke client I would never use. I would always use fire client from a remote event. I did show that earlier in this video. Invoke client would be used to send data from the server to the client, and then you would get data from the client and pass it to the server, but that makes no sense. I'm not even going to show it. If you're really interested, then you'll find many tutorials on it, or even videos on it, or online blogs about it, but I'm not going to show it because I really recommend not using it. It's really not good, and it could crash. I think it could cause problems in your game. I'm not sure, but I think it could. But anyway, that's all I have in this video. Hope you got something out of it. If you got something out of it, that's great. So yeah, that's all I got, guys. Thanks for watching.